When you picture a city, what comes to mind? Is it these gleaming, perfect towers of glass and steel shooting up into the sky? Or is it something a little more, a little more chaotic, a little more human? The 20th century was this incredible battleground of ideas, but it wasn't fought with armies. It was fought with steel, glass, paint, and concrete. So let's dive into this amazing story of rules and the rebellion that shattered them. Just look at these two. On one side, you've got this clean, rigid, totally rational glass box. And on the other, a building that literally looks like it's alive, like it's moving, and it's just completely thumbing its nose at convention. So how in the world did our vision for what a building should be change so dramatically in just a couple of decades? That's really the big question we're going to dig into. All right, to get a handle on the rebellion, first we have to understand the rules they were rebelling against. And back in the early 20th century, the future had this very specific and honestly a very appealing set of rules. And it all went by one powerful name: modernism. This simple phrase, form follows function, was the movement's rallying cry. But it was so much more than just a design tip. It was a promise. Think about your smartphone for a second. There are no useless buttons, no fancy decorations. Every single element is there for a reason, right? It has a purpose. Well, that's the whole idea of form follows function. And for a generation of thinkers, it promised a brand new world built on pure logic and efficiency, totally stripped of all the fancy historical baggage of the past. You have to put yourself in that mindset. After the total chaos and the senseless destruction of World War I, people were just desperate for some kind of order, some rationality. And so you had these thinkers at places like the Bauhaus School in Germany, and they championed this new universal style. They thought it could create a better, more efficient, and more honest world for everybody. Buildings, they said, should be boiled down to their absolute essentials. No frills, no historical fluff, just pure, honest structure. And you can see this idea take shape perfectly in the evolution of the New York skyline. You start with the early skyscrapers like the Woolworth Building. Yeah, it's tall, for sure, but it's still kind of clinging to all those old-school Gothic details. Then something interesting happens. New York's 1916 zoning laws, which were actually designed to let sunlight hit the street, forced architects to build up in these steps, and that gave us the iconic, tapering wedding cake look of the Empire State Building. And finally, we get to the ultimate expression of modernism, Mies van der Rohe's Seagram Building, a perfect, unadorned glass box. It's the absolute peak of form follows function. But as you can imagine, as cities started filling up with all these identical glass boxes, some people began to feel like something important was missing. That whole utopian vision of a perfectly rational world started to feel a little, sterile, impersonal even. A rebellion was definitely brewing. And this was the big question that the next movement, postmodernism, really tried to answer. What happens when our hunt for universal style just erases local identity, when efficiency totally stamps out all that messy human vitality? Now, this is really cool because this slide basically lays out the gentle manifesto of postmodernism. It's a direct counterargument to everything that came before. Modernism said, be pure. Postmodernism celebrated the hybrid. Modernism was all about being clean and simple. Postmodernism said, let's embrace compromise and complexity. And my favorite, messy vitality. Just think of a bustling street market with all the sights and sounds and smells. That's messy vitality. It's the polar opposite of a perfectly ordered, sterile shopping mall. And that's exactly what postmodernism wanted to bring back to our cities. So what did this rebellion actually look like in practice? Well, postmodern architects started putting back all the stuff that modernism had tossed out. They mixed historical styles, they told stories with their buildings, and they used this really clever idea called double coding, basically making designs that architectural pros could appreciate on one level, but that regular people could also understand and enjoy. And maybe most radically of all, they brought back humor and playfulness. And you can see this rebellion in action right here. So Philip Johnson, a guy who had been one of the high priests of modernism, suddenly sticks this giant Chippendale top, like a piece of high-end furniture, on the AT&T building. It was a scandal. People saw it as total architectural blasphemy. And his lipstick building playfully breaks that rectangular mold entirely. These weren't just buildings anymore. They were statements. They were manifestos written in steel and glass. And this clash of ideas wasn't just happening on our skylines. Oh no, the same philosophical battle was raging in art galleries and museums. The art world was having its own series of radical rebellions, and each one was challenging the very definition of what art could even be. So first up, you have Vorticism in Britain. Now, just like the modernist architects,
The vorticists were fascinated by machines and city life. But where the architects saw these clean, rational lines, vorticists saw something totally different: fragmented, hard-edged, almost violent energy. Their art was a vortex, like this swirling tornado of color and form, plunging right into the chaotic heart of the new industrial world.
But while some artists were diving headfirst into abstraction, others were rebelling against what they saw as its elitism. Social realism, which really flourished between the world wars, was a movement for the people. It was all about making art accessible again, telling clear, easy-to-read stories about the hardships and the heroism of ordinary folks. The whole point was to inspire real social reform. But the rebellion didn't stop there. Oh, no. In fact, it was about to get its most radical and most personal expression. Let's meet Jackson Pollock and abstract expressionism. This is where the rebellion turned completely inward. The new subject wasn't the world outside, it was the very act of creation itself. This was called action painting, and it was absolutely revolutionary. Pollock basically threw out the easel and the paintbrush. He put these giant canvases on the floor and used sticks, trowels, even hardened brushes to drip, drizzle, and pour paint. You can literally feel the physical dance that went into making the work. The canvas wasn't a picture anymore. It was a record of an event. It was an arena for pure action. And the result is just mesmerizing. There's no single thing to focus on. Your eye just dances all over the surface, caught in this web of pure energy. For the first time, line was completely freed from its job of describing things. It was just line, a pure, raw expression of emotion. This was a total liberation from all the rules, all the conventions, all the expectations of what a painting was supposed to be. And then came pop art, which was kind of the ultimate joke on the whole art establishment. Andy Warhol just took the things that were all around him every day, advertising, comic strips, celebrity photos, and he turned them into high art. By reproducing images of Marilyn Monroe or Campbell's soup cans, pop art held up a mirror to the commercial world we all lived in. It was both celebrating it and critiquing it at the same time. This was the art of the everyday, the art of the supermarket aisle, the art of the tabloid magazine. So, after this century-long tug-of-war between universal rules and personal rebellion, where did we finally land? Is there some kind of middle ground between the rigid box and total chaos? Is there a way to build for the future without just erasing the past? Well, let's look at one architect's answer. Think about what makes a good neighbor. They don't just live in their own little bubble, right? They contribute to the community. They respect the local vibe. Well, that's exactly how architect Cesar Pelli saw his buildings. He argued that architects shouldn't just plop their own style down in a city. No, a building should be a responsible citizen. It should respond to its specific place, its history, its culture, and, of course, the people who are actually going to use it. Take his World Financial Center in New York. At first glance, these look like sleek, modern towers. But Pelli did something brilliant here. He managed to synthesize the two warring ideas. He used all that cool modernist technology, but he brought back the postmodernist idea of narrative, of telling a story. This is just a perfect example of his whole approach. Each tower is topped with a distinct hat that references a different major world culture: Roman, Egyptian, and both Mesopotamian and pre-Columbian cultures. It's a fantastic use of that double coding idea we talked about. You have this sophisticated, modern complex that also tells a rich, accessible story about global finance and history. Just brilliant. And we can see this same philosophy at work in the design for this tower in Buenos Aires. Look, it doesn't start with some predetermined shape, like a cookie-cutter design that could be dropped down anywhere in the world. No, instead, the form is actually sculpted by its surroundings. First, they rotate it for better views. Then, the corners are curved to soften its presence. Finally, it's sliced and pulled to create this unique skyline and a really inviting entrance. The final building isn't just a generic box, it's a direct response to its specific place on Earth. So, the next time you're walking through your city, really look around. The buildings and the art, they aren't just sitting there. They're telling a story. They are part of this ongoing conversation between order and chaos, the universal and the personal, between the rules and the rebellion. And the really crucial question is, what story is your city telling? And maybe even more important, what role are you going to play in writing the next chapter?